Hey everybody, let's have a discussion about budget beater strategies for a successful homeschool. I know a lot of parents feel like they want to homeschool. They feel that that's their ideal choice, their best option. However, they feel that finances are what prevents them from doing it. So let's talk about how we can overcome that hurdle, because I am a firm believer in where there is a will, there is a way. And so for you, you may feel that there is no possibility to make homeschool a reality for you, but I believe that it absolutely is within your reach. Just depending on circumstances, it may take a little more effort, it may take a little more creativity. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like for you, but let's dive in and talk about it. Be sure to stick to the end too, because we're going to talk about several aspects of how to make this work for our budget. Now, let's just acknowledge the straight up truth. For most of us parents living in America, we know that tax dollars are going to public schools. And when you are a homeschooler, you have to accept the fact that your own tax dollars are going to schools that you won't be using. Just resolve, settle it. At least it's blessing somebody and it's serving some children who maybe can't homeschool or can't go to a private school or a charter school or whatever the ideal situation would be for them. That is something that I've had to reconcile. I know some states will provide vouchers, they'll provide certain benefits to homeschoolers. Personally, I don't live in a state that does that. So on one hand, I would love it if our state would do something to help homeschoolers. On the other hand, there's a whole other discussion about perhaps not wanting the government to reimburse you anyway in terms of education. That's a different topic for another day. But let's go ahead and move into how do we make this work for us, especially those of us who aren't getting any kind of vouchers or anything to help us with the journey. First off, what are our primary expenses as homeschoolers? What are the things that financially are going to impact us in a way that maybe parents whose children are in traditional schools don't have to deal with? The first thing is potentially childcare or the impact to your income. You know, some parents quit jobs, some parents scale back hours in order to homeschool, and there's an impact to their income that way. Other parents continue working, but then have to pay for childcare, whereas a public school student would be in school during the time that the parent is working. The second thing would be curriculum. The third is going to be food or groceries, depending again on your situation. Some parents that may not impact as much as others, but I found out when we had a foster child that the schools in our system provide breakfast and lunch to the children who go there. So if you are used to your children attending a public school that provides meals, then your grocery budget may need to be increased a little bit in order for you to homeschool. And then the fourth area of impact financially would just be miscellaneous expenses like supplies and equipment that you may feel that you need to have in order to homeschool to carry out the education successfully. So we're going to talk about each one of those four sets of expenses in a few minutes. First, I'd like us to focus on inflow. Here's the thing. Anytime we talk about finances and budgets, if we want to balance a budget, we're trying to get that inflow and outflow more together even. We need to talk about both sides of the equation. And if you're like me, a lot of times your mind defaults to how can I save money? How can I decrease my outflow? How can I save money on car insurance? You know, things like that. How can I save on my grocery expenses or on eating out? Or we look at what can we do to minimize the outflow. However, half of the part of balancing a budget is the inflow. Now, before we get into all the nitty gritty, I want to encourage you with a few thoughts. First of all, no matter where you are financially right now, I encourage you not to think of your situation as permanent. Think of it as this isn't forever. And even some of the strategies that we're going to talk about today, they don't have to be forever commitments. They don't have to be forever strategies. They are things to help get you through this season. And I believe that there's always better opportunities on the horizon. So even if you're in a place right now where your budget feels really tight and you feel that you need to penny pinch in a sense, don't get yourself locked into feeling like it's got to always be that way. I can share from our own experience that our circumstances have changed over the 11 and a half years that we've been homeschooling. When we first started out, I was working full time from home mostly. My husband was working full time outside of the home, and neither of us could afford to quit our jobs or to even scale back, really. So we had to make homeschooling work with both of us working full time. Thankfully, it was only about a year in, not quite a year, when I was able to scale back my hours to part time. And that gave us some breathing room in our schedule without losing my entire income. So that circumstance changed, and it stayed that way for close to 10 years. It's just been recently that I've been able to scale back even from that. And so I just want to encourage you that wherever you find yourself right now, there is definitely the endless possibilities that things could shift and change in your favor as you go along. So be encouraged, because I know that talking about budget and finance is not always fun. So if you need a little fun break, just pause the video and write down a few dreams. Write down a few things. What would you love to see happen in your future? And then come back and let's talk about the rest of the nitty gritty. I only say all of that because I know that discussions about finances and budget are not always fun. So keep this in the forefront of your mind as we talk about some budget beater strategies, that it doesn't have to be cumbersome and it doesn't have to be forever. Okay, let's get started. Now, as I said, anytime we talk about budget, we need to talk about inflow and outflow. So I want to start with inflow. If you feel that homeschooling is not within reach for you right now because of budget, let's first talk about, is there anything you can do to get your inflow, your income, higher? If you can raise that, then that will give you some breathing room that you can then use towards your children's education at home. So what are some ways you can do that? Well, obviously, the one we tend to think of is our fixed income of a job, a part-time or a full-time job. Definitely, I encourage you to look for opportunities that you can work from home, whether that's like a virtual assistant type job or a customer care kind of job that you can do on your own hours or on your own terms from home. I know that those opportunities are out there more and more these days than they used to be. Dovetailing with that, there are all kinds of options for side hustles nowadays. And you can even search some of the best side hustles for moms or some of the best side hustles for busy parents, things like that. So if a traditional job isn't necessarily where you're looking to raise your income, maybe a side hustle is. Maybe it's something you can do online. Maybe it's something with digital products. Maybe it's something, depending on where you live and how comfortable you are, in service-based side hustles like Instacart shopping or door dashing or things like that. I don't know, just ideas that you could look into and see what fits you and what fits your capabilities. I mean, I've even heard of people these days, apparently there's a whole service now about ways to rent out your car, kind of like an Airbnb does with a house, but they do it with cars now. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities to bring in income that we used to not have. So I would encourage you just to dig into some of those things, do a little bit of research, see if any of it resonates with you. I'm not suggesting you just spin your wheels and work yourself, finger to the bone and not get hardly anything for it. I'm just suggesting that you look for creative ways to raise your income. Other options, at least for temporary relief, might be to go through your house and see what you can sell that you don't need. I'm not saying go through your house and sell all your furniture and things you love. I'm just saying, you know, I know how bad I am about clearing out my kids' clothes, and I keep things thinking just in case, I'm going to need them. And I've got closets worth of stuff that I need to just go through and take to a once upon a child or a place that'll give me a little bit of money for them because I need to face the truth that I'm never going to use them again, right? Things like that. Things that you don't need anymore and maybe hold some value for someone else and would give you a little bit of income. And then lastly, as you do get into your homeschool journey, you're going to find opportunities to resell used curriculum, either curriculum that is in good shape still, or maybe in some cases, things that you bought as part of a set and you didn't even need all of the components, and you'll have some brand new unused books that you could sell to other parents. There are several Facebook groups just for the curriculum we use. So I'm sure there are many, many for all the curriculum providers out there, where moms and dads get on there and they just sell each other their used or unneeded stuff. And it's a little bit of extra to put towards the next purchase of curriculum. So those are some ways that you could maybe raise the income side, the inflow side, and get that number higher so you don't feel the impact as much of the outflow. I hope that makes sense. So now let's talk about outflow. What are some things we can do to be able to homeschool without the expenses really, really hurting us? Now, the first thing I mentioned as terms of major expenses for a homeschooling family is just simply who's going to be with your child. Are you going to be at work all day and you need to hire childcare or a daycare or something like that, a nanny, I don't know, or is that provided for already? Maybe you have an arrangement with family or something that you don't have to worry about childcare expenses. So you've got the very first thing to deal with about income. Is somebody going to have to quit a job? Is somebody going to have to change up hours, pull back hours, things like that? One idea is, if you both have to work, either full-time or part-time, could you possibly stagger your schedules a little so that somebody is home with the child or the children during all times? Now, what I mean by that is, I don't recommend that, you work one shift and your spouse works the other and you never ever see each other. That's not healthy for either one of you. So I don't mean that. Again, keeping in mind that some of the decisions right now are not forever decisions. They're just for making things happen right now. But perhaps there is a way to stagger your schedules to where you don't need childcare full time. Maybe you just need childcare a few days a week or a few hours a day or something like that. So you might have to get creative and just really flesh out your options for what you need to do in terms of your job, your spouse's job, and who's keeping your child. Now, moving on to the next category of expenses, most of the time I feel that when people think they can't afford to homeschool, if it's not the first category of income impact, then it is this of curriculum. And people have a perception that curriculum is super expensive. Well, I'm going to tell you, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. And that also depends on your definition of expensive. But there are a lot of creative ways to make curriculum come together, to make it happen and gather what you need without necessarily spending thousands of dollars every school year. Now, as we talk about this, I want you to keep in mind that, as with many things in life, curriculum is something that you are going to be trading dollars for time and convenience. Okay. So if you have plenty of time and you don't mind piecing things together on your own and going out and finding the materials, free resources online, things like that you need, if you don't mind doing all of that legwork and pulling all of it together, then you're going to be able to spend less perhaps than getting a pre-made kit of curriculum or something. There are two sides of the spectrum. There are two ends of the pendulum, so to speak. So you most likely will find yourself somewhere in the middle. But there is the right out of the box, everything's done for you, videos, all of the stuff that just in one fell swoop, it's done and you don't have to look any further. Personally, I love that. On the times that I have been able to do that, that's my favorite way to go, because again, you're trading your time and convenience for your dollar. So on the years that we've been able to do that, that's my favorite. However, there are years that we haven't been able to do that. So then we swing further to the middle or even the other side of the pendulum and try to look for more creative ways to pull curriculum together. Now with us, we like to do some books only options through our curriculum provider. We don't necessarily always order the full book kit. They have video kits, and then they also have book kits from who we use anyway. And we don't necessarily do that. Sometimes I'll just buy a textbook and the test packets for one subject. And in about $30 to $50, I'm done with that subject for the whole year. That's just one example. Now, you say, well, that's still a lot because $50 times 7 subjects, maybe that's still too much for what you can spend right now. So let's keep going to the other end of the pendulum. Not only are there free resources out there, but like I mentioned earlier, there are tons of used curriculum Facebook groups. And you can get on, if you say you were to go to our curriculum provider's website, bjupresshomeschool.com, make a wish list of everything you would want if you could buy it all new. Then head over to one of these Facebook groups and start seeing how much you can get from other parents who are selling their stuff. And you might be able to get either identical versions of what's on your wish list, or you might be able to get some older editions of the same classwork. Pro tip, always make sure that your editions match though. If you're buying a textbook for a subject, that's the 3rd edition. Don't buy a workbook to go with it. That's the 2nd edition. Always make sure your editions match, or that's just going to create headaches for you later and for your kid. So you can head over to these Facebook groups and start pricing out what can you find used, what can you go ahead and buy, and then whatever's left, look at the best ways to buy that new from the first website. Or ask yourself if that's stuff that you can replace with free resources online. There's a website called Teachers Pay Teachers that I found very helpful sometimes for just some free resources, or you can make purchases at very small nominal costs. You can get things like book report templates, science project ideas, things like that that could just help supplement your curriculum. So there are a lot of resources out there, a lot of ideas to help you. This can be done, again, depending on where your budget is right now on that pendulum. That's going to determine how much time you have to put into making it all happen. And it could be an inconvenience or it may not be. But again, this is where you and only you and your spouse, if applicable, need to be able to weigh out your priorities budget-wise, financially. You know, for me, when I was working full-time, it made much more sense for me to continue working full-time and pay more for a video prefab kit than for me to quit my job and be able to get cheaper curriculum that I had time to put together myself. It didn't make sense. The numbers didn't make sense for me to quit my job and do it all myself. So really the video kit, while it was more expensive, that was the way we were able to homeschool at first. That's what made it possible. So that's just some things for you to think through. And I hope that didn't sound convoluted too much. But let's move on to the next area. Food and groceries. Now, like I said, not everybody's going to be impacted by this as much. But if you have been used to sending your children to a school that provided meals for them, then this is just something to account for in your budget that you're going to be feeding your kids at home. And so you'll just need to make those arrangements as needed. I will recommend a tremendous resource. If you find that your grocery budget is just really breaking the bank month after month after month, and you don't know how to scale it down, there is a lady named Tiffany. Her website is don'twastethecrumbs.com. And she is phenomenal. I highly recommend her. I recommend her blogs, her articles, her strategies. She is amazing. Again, you're going to trade time and convenience for dollars. So Tiffany will teach you how to save money on that grocery budget, how to meal plan, how to do shopping lists, how to know the kind of system of when to find the best prices and where to find the best prices. She is awesome at that, but you're going to have to put your time into doing the work and doing the research to make it happen. However, just wanted to throw that out there in case it helps anybody. We were shocked at how much of a difference it made when we used her system. The 4th category of expenses is just the miscellaneous supplies and equipment. And I just want to encourage you, this doesn't have to be daunting. So in this fourth category, you can take as minimalistic approach to this as you need to for where your budget is right now. I think that some parents, especially us moms, we get on Pinterest and start looking at homeschool rooms and the whole setup, these beautiful rooms that people have set up with all their cute little desks. Oh, and there's a dry erase board on one wall and a chalkboard on the other, and all the decorations and the cute little cubicles with all the storage, and it looks wonderful. And first of all, you can tell from most of those pictures that a child has not been in that room, or it would not look that way, right? But seriously, you don't have to go through a whole overhaul of your house to be able to homeschool. For real, when we started, we were in a townhouse that I didn't even have an office in. I had my desk set up in a corner of the living room, and we had our dining room table that doubled as school time. So my daughter would sit at the dining room table and do her work, and we would clear it off for meals, and or we would eat in the living room, whatever the case was. It wasn't an extravagant setup by any means. It was seriously a laptop and some pencils and crayons kind of a thing. You don't have to go crazy setting up a space, even with equipment. I mentioned the laptop. Even with equipment, if your children are going to do videos for their school, then obviously they'll need some kind of device that connects to the internet, or if you do DVDs or something like that, they'll need something like that. Chances are you already have a device that can be used for that. If it's a laptop that you have that they can use for a few hours, or if it's your phone or an iPad or something like that, chances are there's something around your house that could be repurposed for that for a couple hours a day. When it comes to things like printers, I'll tell you, there have been many years of our homeschool that we did not own a printer. For one thing, they kept breaking. We kept buying these inkjet printers, and then they would work for a few months or a year, and then they would break, and we wouldn't bother replacing them. So honestly, my husband and I have traditionally worked in office jobs, and the companies we worked for had an employee personal use policy for the printers. So they would allow you to print a certain amount of things without worrying about it. You didn't have to pay anybody back. You didn't have to go to a, back in the day, what was it, like the Kinkos and the Staples and things to get things printed. We could just print a few things at work. And honestly, we don't have to print stuff all that often anyway. Even now, we've invested in a laser printer that we love, and I'm thankful for it. It's very convenient to have it, but I know that we can do it without it if we have to. So there are definitely ways that, again, if that's a budgetary concern for you, don't feel like you got to go buy a printer for your homeschool. There are some basic things you can get, like some pencils and crayons and markers and a stapler and a hole punch. I mean, there are just some things that you can keep it pretty simple here in the beginning. And honestly, if you're just starting out, I wouldn't recommend you just go buy a ton of stuff anyway. Like, get in your rhythm here and see what you're really going to want and what you're going to need as you move along. There's nothing wrong with that. When it comes to supplies, it's really not hard to stock your homeschool. What I will tell you is, as a word of caution, is just if you buy a set of curriculum that comes with a supply list, maybe don't go rushing out and buying all of them, all of the things on that list yet. That was the mistake we made in the beginning when we were first starting kindergarten with our oldest. We got the cumulative list of supplies for all the subjects, which was only like 3 subjects, but it was a long list. I mean, it had like, of course, pencils and glue sticks and things like that, but it had modeling clay on there. I remember that being so hard to find. And we just went out and we tried to get everything we could on that list. It was expensive. And then we found out that we didn't even use a lot of it. Not because we couldn't have, but once we got into the curriculum, we realized that we weren't going to stop and do every activity. Especially since we did use video curriculum, our daughter would watch some activities and we wouldn't do them hands-on. I don't think we ever did use that modeling clay, if we ever found it. I can't even remember. I just remember it being a huge thing. And so I want to encourage you, don't feel like you've got to go out and buy this whole list of stuff. You're going to look for some basic things, get those things in your homeschool. And then honestly, a lot of times we just buy things as we need them. If my kid gets to a science project and he needs cotton balls and macaroni and I mean, I don't know, then he'll tell us, oh, hey, I need this to be able to do this activity. And we'll decide, okay, that's feasible. We can go get that. Or I don't really know that we're going to spend the money for that when we're only going to use it once. So let's just pass that activity. And we just kind of pick and choose the way we need to. So I don't want you to be overwhelmed by this fourth category of supplies and equipment. Like I said, you can take a very minimal approach to it, however you need to fit your budget. So I know that that's been a lot to take in a short amount of time, but I hope that this discussion has been valuable to you to help you think towards how you can make homeschooling work for you and your family. Like I said, I'm a firm believer of where there's a will, there's a way. Sometimes you just have to get kind of creative to make it happen. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you found this video helpful. And also, I want to invite you to download my free ebook at wiserhomeschool.com. This ebook is on unshakable confidence. I want to help give you a firm foundation as you either get started in homeschooling or as you continue your journey. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.